The blade was pointed at my throat before I even finished my sentence. I froze mid-word, my hands still raised in the open gesture the embassy had taught me for peaceful greetings, and stared past the shining edge of the weapon at the 6 guards surrounding me. They wore black armor that seemed to drink the light of the throne room, and their eyes, all 6 pairs, were locked on me like I was already guilty of something I did not understand. At the top of the room, on a raised platform made of dark stone, sat the princess of this world. Her skin shifted color as I watched, storm gray sliding into a deep, furious violet. Her name was HFY, heir to a throne older than my entire country, and a moment ago she had been calm. Now she was on her feet, and the whole room had gone still around her anger. My translator earpiece buzzed and gave me a rough version of what she had just shouted at her guards. Something about disrespect, something about a wound I did not know existed. I had asked a simple question about trade, about grain shipments, and somehow that question had cracked open old pain I never knew was there. The guard closest to me pressed the blade a little closer. I could feel the cold metal a breath away from my skin. My heart pounded so hard I was sure everyone in the room could hear it. I had one choice, and it was not to run. There was nowhere to run. 6 guards, a princess who looked ready to have me thrown from the tallest tower in the city, and an entire alien court watching to see what I would do. So I did the only thing that made sense to me in that moment. I stayed still, and I spoke. I told her I did not know what I had done wrong. I told her that if my words had hurt her, or her people, it was because I did not have the knowledge to avoid it, not because I meant any harm. I said I was sorry for the pain, even if I did not yet understand its shape. The room went quieter than before. Even the guard holding the blade seemed to hesitate, as if unsure whether to finish the movement he had started. HFY stepped down from her platform. One step, then another, her long robe trailing behind her like a shadow given color. She moved slower than I expected, studying me the whole way, her violet eyes never leaving mine. When she reached the guard in front of me, she raised one hand and gently pushed the blade away from my throat. The guard obeyed instantly, stepping back into formation, though his eyes stayed sharp and watchful. She circled me once, the way a hunter studies something it has not decided to trust yet. "Do you know what happened to my people?" she asked, her voice carrying easily through the translator now, cold and controlled. I told her the truth. I did not know. Nobody had explained it to me before I arrived. I had only been briefed on trade terms and basic customs, nothing about history, nothing about pain. She studied my face for a long moment, as if trying to decide if I was lying. Then she said something that surprised everyone in the room, including her own advisors. She said that most humans who stood where I stood would have lied. They would have claimed to understand everything, apologized with practiced words, and tried to charm their way out of danger. She said she had met 17 humans like that in the past few years, each one smoother and more dishonest than the last. But I had told her I did not know. I had admitted ignorance instead of pretending wisdom, and for reasons I did not yet understand, that honesty seemed to matter more to her than anything else. She turned to her advisor, a tall woman with pale green skin and sharp eyes, and spoke rapidly in her own language. My translator struggled to keep up, catching only fragments. Something about trust. Something about a chance worth taking. The guards lowered their weapons fully now, stepping back to form a wider circle instead of a closing one. The tension in the room began to ease, though my own heart was still racing. HFY turned back to me. Her expression had changed from fury to something quieter, more thoughtful. She told me that centuries ago, before the current peace treaty existed, her people had suffered greatly because of contact with an outside world that did not understand them. A shipment of foreign goods, meant as a gift, carried something hidden inside it, a sickness that spread through her ancestors like fire through dry grass. Thousands died before anyone understood what was happening. The wound from that disaster had never fully healed, even generations later. When I asked about grain shipments, I had unknowingly touched that same old scar, without meaning to, without knowing it was there at all. I told her I was deeply sorry, not because I feared her anger, but because I now understood the weight of what her people had lost. She studied me again, longer this time, and something in her posture softened. She asked me a question then, one I did not expect. She asked why I had not simply agreed with her immediately, apologized without argument, and tried to smooth things over the way the others had. I told her the truth again. I said that lying to calm her down would have been easy, but it would not have been real. If she was going to trust me, or my people, it needed to be built on something honest, even if that honesty put me in danger. For the first time since I had entered the room, Ithria's expression shifted into something close to respect. She raised her hand and touched 2 fingers lightly to my chest, over my heart. Later I would learn this was a gesture reserved only for those her people considered close, almost like family, never given to strangers, and certainly never given to outsiders on a first meeting. The room around us seemed to hold its breath, watching this small gesture with wide eyes, as if witnessing something rare and important. She spoke again, this time more calmly, explaining that trust between our 2 peoples had been fragile for years, built on careful words and rehearsed diplomacy that never felt truly honest. She said she had grown tired of representatives who told her only what she wanted to hear, afraid of her anger, afraid of losing trade deals, afraid of consequences. She said what she wanted, more than politeness, was honesty, even when it was uncomfortable, even when it came wrapped in ignorance instead of polished words. I felt the weight of the moment settle over me. This was not just about surviving an angry princess anymore. It was about building something real between 2 very different worlds, something that could last far longer than any single conversation. She asked if I would be willing to stay longer than my scheduled visit, to learn about her people properly this time, their history, their customs, and the wound that still shaped so much of how they saw outsiders. She said if I was willing to listen honestly, she was willing to teach honestly. I agreed without hesitation, not because I was afraid of what might happen if I refused, but because something about her sincerity made me want to understand her world properly, not just as a diplomat completing a mission, but as someone genuinely curious. She turned to her guards and spoke firmly, dismissing the tension that had filled the room only minutes before. The blades were fully sheathed now, the formation broken, and slowly, the atmosphere shifted from danger to something closer to cautious welcome. Ithria walked back toward her platform, then paused, and looked over her shoulder at me. She said, this was only the beginning. That trust, built in a single conversation, was fragile, and it would take much more than one honest answer to repair what generations of careful diplomacy had failed to fix. But she also said, quietly enough that only I seemed to hear it clearly through my earpiece, that a single honest answer was more than she had received in a very long time, and that alone made this day different from all the others before it. As she took her seat again, her advisors moved closer, already discussing what this meant for future meetings, future treaties, future exchanges between our worlds. The court slowly returned to its usual rhythm, though the air still felt charged with something new. I stood there in the center of the room, my heart finally slowing, realizing that what had begun as a terrifying mistake had somehow turned into the start of something much bigger than a simple diplomatic visit. I did not know yet what challenges waited ahead, what tests of trust would come, or how deep the wounds of her people truly ran. But I knew one thing clearly, as I stood there in that ancient throne room, surrounded by guards who no longer saw me as a threat, and a princess who no longer looked at me with fury. Sometimes the most dangerous moments in life become the very ones that open doors nobody expected to open, simply because someone chose honesty over comfort, even when comfort would have been so much easier to offer. And as Ithria watched me from her seat, her expression calm now, thoughtful, and strangely warm compared to the fury I had first walked into, I understood that this single moment would shape everything that followed between us, in ways neither of us could yet fully imagine.